The morning of May 1st, 2021 began like any other day in Puerto Rico. Warm air drifting through quiet neighborhoods, the ocean breeze masking the darkness that had already unfolded. Somewhere not far from the capital, a young woman lay hidden, her life brutally cut short, while the man responsible moved freely, pretending everything was normal. Within hours, her name would dominate headlines, ignite public outrage, and expose one of the most chilling crimes in Puerto Rico's recent history. Her name was Keishla Rodríguez Ortiz. Keishla was 27 years old, a dental assistant with a bright smile and a future she believed was finally falling into place. Friends described her as kind, hard-working, and deeply hopeful about becoming a mother. She was pregnant, excited, and carefully planning the next chapter of her life. But behind the happiness she shared with the world, there was a relationship filled with secrecy, control, and fear, one that would ultimately lead to her death. The man at the center of Keishla's life was Felix Verdejo Sanchez, a professional boxer, once celebrated as a national hero. To the public, he was disciplined, talented, and respected. To Keishla, he was someone she trusted with her future. Their relationship was hidden from most people, complicated by the fact that Verdejo was married. Despite this, Keishla believed his promises. She believed he would leave his wife. She believed he would acknowledge their child. And most dangerously, she believed she was safe. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Keishla told close friends that she was afraid. She expressed concern about how Felix might react to the pregnancy becoming public. She saved messages. She confided in people she trusted. Those warnings would later become haunting clues, pieces of a puzzle that investigators would carefully assemble after it was already too late. On the night of April 29th, Keishla was last seen leaving her home. She told her family she was meeting someone she trusted. She never came back. By the next morning, her phone was silent. Calls went unanswered. Panic began to spread quickly among her loved ones. And by May 1st, she was officially reported missing. As the search began, Felix Verdejo presented himself as a concerned friend. He gave interviews. He spoke calmly. He denied any involvement. But investigators were already noticing cracks in his story. Phone records placed him near Keishla shortly before she vanished. Surveillance footage raised further questions, and witnesses would soon describe events so disturbing that they would shock the entire island. According to federal investigators, the truth was far more brutal than anyone had imagined. In the early hours of April 29th, Felix Verdejo allegedly picked up Keishla under the pretense of talking things through. What happened next was not an argument. It was a planned execution. Prosecutors would later state that he assaulted her, injected her with drugs, and bound her before driving her to a bridge overlooking a lagoon. But he did not act alone. A man named Luis Antonio Berrios, a childhood friend of Verdejo, was later arrested as an accomplice. His testimony would become one of the most chilling aspects of the case. According to Berrios, Felix beat Keishla, tied her limbs, and attached a concrete block to her body. Still alive, she was thrown from the bridge into the water below. When she attempted to surface, she was allegedly forced back down until she drowned. The brutality of the crime stunned investigators. This was not a crime of sudden rage. This was methodical, deliberate, calculated. Days later, Keishla's body was recovered from the lagoon. The confirmation shattered her family and ignited public fury. Vigils were held across Puerto Rico, streets filled with protesters demanding justice. Her face became a symbol, not just of a single crime, but of a larger issue involving power, gender violence, and silence. As details emerged, the image of Felix Verdejo began to collapse. Sponsors cut ties. His boxing career ended overnight. The hero became the villain. Prosecutors charged him with kidnapping, resulting in death, carjacking, and the killing of an unborn child. Charges that carried the possibility of life imprisonment. In court, the case unfolded like a nightmare. Text messages revealed manipulation and fear. Testimony painted a picture of a woman trying to protect herself while navigating a dangerous relationship with a powerful man. Keishla's family listened as the final moments of her life were described in painful detail, each word reopening wounds that would never fully heal. Yet through the horror, one thing became clear. Keishla's voice would not be silenced. The evidence she left behind, the people she confided in, and the determination of investigators ensured that her story would be told. This was no longer just a missing person case. It was a reckoning. And as the trial continued, the question remained, how did a man with fame, discipline, and everything to lose choose such unimaginable violence? And could this tragedy have been prevented if the warning signs had been taken seriously? The answers would only become clearer as the courtroom doors closed, witnesses took the stand, and the final chapters of this devastating story began to unfold. As the trial moved forward, the courtroom became a place where two versions of Felix Verdejo existed at the same time. One was the celebrated athlete, whose image once filled billboards and inspired young fighters. The other was the man prosecutors described as cold, calculating, and willing to kill to protect his reputation. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Prosecutors built their case piece by piece, relying heavily on digital evidence and witness testimony. Phone records showed repeated contact between Verdejo and Keishla in the hours before her disappearance. Location data placed him exactly where investigators believed the crime occurred. Surveillance cameras captured movements that aligned with the prosecution's timeline. Every detail tightened the noose. The most disturbing testimony came from Luis Antonio Barrios. Speaking in court, he described how Verdejo contacted him in the early morning hours asking for help. Barrios claimed he witnessed Keishla being assaulted, restrained, and ultimately thrown into the water. His voice trembled as he described her trying to survive, fighting against the weight tied to her body. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as the final moments of her life were laid bare. The defense attempted to discredit Barrios, painting him as unreliable and self-serving. They argued that there was no direct video evidence of the murder itself, but prosecutors reminded the jury that most murders do not happen on camera. What matters is the overwhelming pattern of evidence, and in this case it was impossible to ignore. Medical examiners testified about the cause of death: drowning, signs of physical trauma, evidence consistent with restraint. The unborn child did not survive. Each clinical explanation felt heavier than the last, reducing a vibrant young woman and her future into cold medical terms. Outside the courtroom, public anger never faded. Protests continued. Murals of Keishla appeared across Puerto Rico. Her name became a rallying cry, a reminder of what happens when power is used as a shield against accountability. Many saw the case as a symbol of deeper problems: how fear keeps people silent, how fame can delay justice, and how victims are often blamed for trusting the wrong person. Throughout the trial, Keishla's family sat together, rarely speaking, holding each other through every testimony. They listened to details no parent or sibling should ever hear, yet they remained present, determined that her story would not be reduced to statistics or forgotten headlines. Felix Verdejo, once confident and charismatic, now appeared withdrawn. The cameras that once followed him into arenas now followed him into custody. The silence he maintained spoke louder than any defense argument. The man who once thrived under pressure now avoided eye contact, his future shrinking with every passing day. When closing arguments arrived, prosecutors focused on intent. They argued that this was not a mistake, not an accident, and not a moment of lost control. It was a decision, a choice made repeatedly, from the planning to the assault, to the final act of forcing a pregnant woman into the water. They reminded the jury that Keishla trusted him, and that trust was used against her. The defense asked the jury to consider doubt, to question the credibility of witnesses, to separate emotion from evidence. But the weight of the facts was heavy, and the story they told was consistent and devastating. After deliberation, the verdict was delivered. Felix Verdejo was found guilty on all major charges: kidnapping, resulting in death; carjacking, the killing of an unborn child. The sentence would ensure that he would never again walk free as the man he once was. There was no celebration in the courtroom, only a quiet release of breath. Justice, while necessary, could not undo what had been taken. Keishla would not return. Her child would never be born. Her family would carry the loss forever. But her story did not end with the verdict. Keishla Rodríguez Ortiz became more than a victim. She became a reminder that warning signs matter, that silence can be deadly, that power and status should never place someone above the law. Her case forced conversations that many had avoided, pushing society to confront uncomfortable truths. In the end, this was not just the story of a fallen boxer or a tragic crime. It was the story of a young woman who wanted a future, who trusted the wrong person, and who paid the ultimate price for someone else's fear of consequences. Her name is still spoken, her face still remembered, and through every retelling of this case, her voice continues to exist, stronger than the silence that once surrounded her. Because some stories demand to be told, and some names must never be forgotten.